Hello. So I'm coming on here because I want to talk about something today. I'm going to see what Spirit wants to focus on because part of me wants to focus on this revelation that I had yesterday around detachment, and how detachment is a way for us to access time travel. And how I remembered this yesterday. And it comes after a long, long time of feeling ashamed of my ability to detach very easily. I've always been someone who is pretty detached. And I used to feel ashamed because over the past few years, I've collected some shame around that because I started to feel like there was something wrong with me, like I was emotionally numb. I started to feel that, especially as I started this spiritual journey, actually. I started to feel like there was something wrong with me because I couldn't cry, or I wasn't affected by these things. I didn't feel this way. I didn't feel how I felt like I should be feeling. And while I recognize that there's no wrong way to process grief and things like that, I started to feel upset with myself for not feeling grief, for not feeling upset about certain things, or not having the reactions that I feel like I should, not having prolonged reactions. And the more I just started to think about it yesterday, and this is something I've probably been chipping away at for quite a bit of time, but yesterday it kind of felt like the culmination where I just kind of got it. Yesterday, I just started to think about where that could really, really be coming from, because I was listening to this reading from Lexi the Leo, and she is so gifted. And she's talking about something, and I felt very triggered by it because I was like, I can't go through another year of this. I don't want to do this. And now, and like you telling me this, I don't want to do this, so I'm not going to do it. And then I was watching a reading of mine, and I checked the time, and I was surprised that 7 minutes had gone by because it felt like a minute to me. And I realized that for me, time moves quicker when I'm watching my things. And it's something about my energy, and I was thinking about timing in general. And so yesterday I started to have this thought around detachment, because I had this experience where I had this man message me responding to this video that I'd put out about calling in my soul tribe, calling in my soulmate. I was so excited in that video. I was like, I'm going to call them in. It was just one of the promptings of Spirit. And I had somebody message me recently, like a couple of days ago, maybe just yesterday. No, like 2 days ago, because of that video. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I was pretty relaxed, and I was happy about how calm I was in reaction to somebody messaging me, because I've been waiting, And then, so I responded, and then I haven't heard back since. And I've thought about it some more, and I've kind of moved on. I've kind of already moved on from the idea that this person could be someone that I invest time and energy into, because of how long they've taken to respond. And it made me think about what this woman, Kennedy Johnson, who I love to watch, she's been going through a whole dating journey, and she says, like, if a guy takes longer to message her, like longer than an hour to message her, she's not talking to him anymore, because if he wanted to, he would. And I know that because I take a long time to message people. But with this email, I responded right away because I understood where things are prioritized in my life. And I knew that this was important to me. And I knew that the feeling that I was having from not getting a response was like, even though it's totally okay for someone to not respond immediately, I just kind of picked up that, I don't know if this is going to work. And I moved on pretty quickly. And I was surprised by that, and I was happy by that, because it's really good that I wasn't getting too attached. But then I started to think about the fact that I can do that very easily. I'm very good at detachment. And I've gone through ups and downs over these past 3 years in how I feel about that part about myself. And for a very long time, I've held a lot of shame, or it's just been repressed, knowing that part of myself. I think for the earlier parts of my life, like for like teenage years, I didn't really, I don't know. I knew that there was that part of myself, but it wasn't a huge conversation in my mind. I was focused on other things, in my daydreams, in my internal world, and just being a teenager and moody and going through a lot. But then, as I've been going through this spiritual awakening, I've really collected a lot of shame around being so detached. Um, and I've heard things from people in my life around my detachment, and things that have not made me feel great about it, things that have made me feel like it's an issue. And then I've taken it on as an issue within myself. And I was thinking back all the way to when I was a child, and my dad told my sister and I that he and my mother were getting divorced. And how for the longest time, I would always say, you know, that moment never really shook me. I remember like fireworks, and I remember that moment. I remember that day. It was sometime in the summer, I think, and I think that there were fireworks happening. That's what I remember, being outside under this gazebo, and there were fireworks, and he told us that. And I remember hearing that, but it didn't really faze me in the way that as I began to grow up and hear the narratives around children of divorced parents and the way that they experience so much trauma from that and so much effects from that, I did not resonate with that. And I felt weird about that. And sometimes I'd feel uncomfortable, and sometimes I would then double down on that because I knew I had this uncomfortable feeling with the fact that I didn't feel a whole lot about it, that I would double down and be like, I never had a reaction. All these overcompensating things to deal with the fact that I did find it kind of strange, and I wasn't sure if that was normal or okay. And then as I entered the spiritual journey, I started to feel like I was numb and I couldn't feel anything. And I remember that after I got out of this relationship and I had realized I was in a relationship that was really unhealthy on both ends. I was very unhealthy because I was not meant to be in a relationship. I didn't want to be in that relationship. I wanted to be in a relationship, but I didn't want to be in that one. And I accepted being in it anyways. So I wasn't being honest. And I really wasn't being accountable for the way that I felt and being honest about what I actually wanted. So I was unhealthy and put my partner through that. And then on the other end, I had a partner who was really insecure about their own sexual expression. And so they were very unhealthy. And we were both had a lot of lack of boundaries and not able to understand, not able to draw boundaries and not able to understand boundaries. And so I ended up experiencing some sexual violence in that relationship, and it's complicated. But yeah, so my reaction to that night when I began to really understand, because I had a phone call with him and I basically had him admit what had happened, and that registered within me, and I cried, and that was a really emotional night, and it kind of like felt like a big purge of just like everything in that moment. And then I think I cried another time in a therapy session after that. And then after that, I was kind of good for a while. I mean, I wasn't good, but I wasn't in this deep like mourning in the way that I thought I should be. I was dealing with a lot and I was emotional, but it wasn't presenting in the way that I felt like it should. And as I would get deeper into this spiritual journey, and that was kind of right before I realized that I was on a spiritual journey, that I was having a spiritual awakening, as I got deeper into this journey, I started to confront more and more this part of myself that felt emotionally numb and trying to understand it. And for quite a long time, I've been trying to pick at it from this place of seeing myself as blocked emotionally and of feeling like there's something wrong and there's something that I'm not seeing, that I'm not understanding, that I need to break through in order to finally release this well of emotions. And I've heard in readings that, there's anger built up. There's something that's you need to let go of. And I think about it and I get so upset. And sometimes I would try to make myself cry, but I wouldn't. I would just be angry. And then sometimes I would cry, and I've been more emotional recently, like physically emotional. But I've been having to now kind of have a little bit more acceptance about the way that I experience emotions. And I think here, like, astrology plays a really interesting role because Cancer is a very heavy sign in my chart. And the way that Cancers are described as crybabies, to me is really inaccurate, like incredibly inaccurate. And I think that wherever that came from, it was actually probably the influence of Cancer with another energy, because I think Cancer on its own is actually quite stoic and not so physically presenting in emotions as one might expect based off of the way that they're characterized. And I know that because of the way that I heavily identified myself with being a Cancer for most of my life, that also added to this shame around the way that I feel. And then these ideas around what it means to be an empath, and me feeling like I was not an empath because I wouldn't just automatically cry if I saw somebody else crying, because I understood. Because I think what it is that the way that I deal with emotions is that I feel the core base of emotions rather than everything that's piled on top of that. I kind of skip all the layers and I go down to the deepest layer, and that's the one that I feel. And oftentimes that emotion is not something that's super physical. And oftentimes it's something that's very quiet, and it's something that can shake you, which I think is why there's always this deep rumbling, this deep anger that sometimes people feel when I get a reading. That was coming up a lot when I would get readings. It's something that's a lot more quiet, and it's kind of detached from everything else. And I've been trying to figure it out and trying to understand it. And just yesterday, I was going through the motions of just, being contemplative. And I don't remember what triggered this introspection exactly, but I just started to realize that there was nothing ever wrong with me in terms of being detached. It didn't mean that I was emotionally numb. It didn't mean that I had problems expressing myself or problems with vulnerability. Detachment is an emotion, and it is an expression of vulnerability. It's an emotional expression. It's not numbness, but even numbness is an emotional expression. It's not empty. It's not superficial. It doesn't mean that there is something that you're not addressing. It is its own thing. It is its own feeling. And I think that feeling that way my whole life and then being told that I wasn't feeling anything at all, or being made to feel as if, and making myself feel like I wasn't feeling anything at all, telling myself I wasn't feeling anything at all, that there was something wrong with me, or that I wasn't acknowledging this secret emotion that was beneath the numbness, that it wasn't numbness, that it wasn't detachment, that there was something under there that I wasn't acknowledging. When people are like, you're not angry, you're sad, but you're angry. And it's just like they consider these certain things secondary emotions, and then there's this primary emotion that really is the truth. I think I've been realizing that I don't agree with that. And I think that it's actually really, it doesn't benefit people to try and erase the validity of these emotions, like numbness, like detachment, these experiences, and try and say that there is something beneath that. Sometimes that is the core feeling. And feeling as if you're not at your core, feeling as if there's something wrong with what is your core expression, and that there's something that needs to be unlocked beneath that, can really make you feel like there is something wrong with you, and like you even are like evil in one way or another. That's how it would kind of manifest for me. I've really experienced a change over the past few years in the way that my mind works. My mind and I are really good friends now. We're not enemies at all, and I don't get bullied by my mind anymore. But we used to have a very tumultuous relationship, and there used to be a voice that was really, really, really harsh and very harmful and kind of violent emotionally to me in my mind. And I haven't heard that voice in so long now. I don't know even how long, but it's been a long time. And it's been, I feel like, over a year. And I think it's come out of this realization that there's just nothing wrong with me. That the way that I experience emotions and the way that I don't experience or express emotions in a certain way, and this underlying detachment that I have and that comes across to me at certain points as numbness, that there's nothing wrong with that, that that's not bad, that that's not something to work through, that that is just part of me. That's a part of my emotional body. That's the way that my emotional body, that's kind of the core, the foundation. Getting to a place where I could accept that and accept that that doesn't mean that I'm empty inside. That doesn't mean that I don't care, that I'm not compassionate, that I don't feel anything, but instead that I am feeling something and that I am acknowledging something, especially when it comes to my relationships with other people, when my reaction seems to be spurring out of the detachment rather than out of tears, and rather than out of anger, rather than out of all of these other things that seem to be more valid emotional expressions or more human expressions, more healthy emotional expressions. When mine is coming out of that numbness, I'm actually seeing a part of humanity that I think has been shamed and closeted away for so long. I don't know when this began, but I've realized that the more that I began to be comfortable with not judging myself for what emotional reactions I have, and the one that seems to be consistent overall, because I'm always aware of it. No matter what I'm feeling emotionally, at the core of almost every emotional expression I have is this detachment. I can always separate from the emotions. I do not become my emotions in that way. There's always a separation. There's always a split. I'm almost always first feeling from the detachment and then feeling from the emotions. And even if the emotion seems to come first, the detachment is always following that and observing that. And that detachment used to feel like a demon to me for a while. I felt like there was this evil energy inside of me that was like watching all of my emotions and criticizing it and judging it, and I used to feel like I was performing when I would cry, or when I would be happy, or when I would be upset, because I could feel this detachment that was like this observer. And I was afraid of it. I was afraid of the detachment, and I was afraid of this observer energy that's super strong. I can't ignore it, you know? It is this huge presence within me. And I think it's actually just the shadow. And I think it's the shadow and the mind, I think, are really, really similar. And I think that because I would feel this observer as I was having these other emotions like tears or joy or anger, and I could feel that observer. I would feel scared of whatever it was observing, scared of whatever I was expressing in that moment, and I would feel judged. And so it became this like evil presence in my life that I think actually ended up being what that evil voice was. It was just taking on what it was observing. And sometimes it scares me because it's such a strong presence, and I really do feel as though the shadow, and I do think that the shadow is its own being. And I've always, or for the past few years, I've been saying that, you're not just one spirit, you're a collection of spirits. There are several spirits all collaborating to create you. And I don't mean your spirit team, I mean just you. It's not just your soul. There's many spirits, and they have different energies and different weights, and some of them will probably never be spoken about, but they exist, which is where I think that idea about Orishas, how many Orishas there are, there's 400 and then there's plus one, the one that you never think about. There's more spirits than we'll ever be able to comprehend, and I think that is too within us, because there's always the unknown within us, because the unknown is darkness, and that's a part of the universe. And so the shadow, which I think is this detachment, which I think I've always been really close to and really connected to, almost like a twin, but I think is why the movie Us by, what's his name? The same man who made Get Out, the really talented director and writer. That movie Us, I think, scared me even more than than Get Out did. And I don't like to watch scary movies, but that movie was really good. And I think the reason why is because I do think that the shadow, it is like this, it's like this being. And it's not just, like there's nothing, you can't erase it or ignore it. You're living this life together. And I don't know, everything is shared. And as I begin to understand more about this detachment, the more I begin to understand who, like, the shadow is and who that is, like what that is. I don't know. And sometimes I wonder if they should have their own name, and if it should be my shadow, if it should be like, if I don't know, because that is Zanala too. But I've never really given myself a chance to be in my shadow without performing. I feel like I don't know if I've ever allowed, well, actually I do know that I have. And that's when I start to scare myself, because that's when I start to feel the most detached. When my shadow is allowed to really be in control. And when my shadow is allowed to be in control, I know that I come across a lot more numb. But really, I have boundaries. My shadow is really great at boundaries. Sometimes can be too harsh, but sometimes I can be too slack. And I think there's not enough recognition of the ways that we fail, and the way that our shadows actually really take up for us and protect us and help us when we are not doing what we need to do to protect ourselves. I found recently a lot that my shadow has come in and taken the reins in conversations where I know that I might allow things to pass by that probably shouldn't, and where I will ignore things that I am sensing intuitively that I shouldn't ignore. Then I've been allowing my shadow more often to come in and be a part of those conversations and speak for me, speak for us, because that is also a part of my voice. I am my shadow as well, and just, I think, and it's interesting because it's like this you want to say you are your shadow. I want to say I am my shadow, but I acknowledge and I recognize this detachment. There is a separation. And that's why I say it feels like there's like a split. There are several beings. If there's only two, then it's just, and if it's just me and my shadow, my shadow and I are different. And it's like we're sisters and really close friends, but it doesn't feel like we are like, it doesn't feel like we're one, but we're different also, if that makes sense. And we can switch places. And I think that that's where that detachment comes from. I think that that's my shadow. And I think I've been so afraid of it on this spiritual journey also because of the way that, well, I don't want to put blame on anybody else, because ultimately it's my responsibility to not take in things that I don't actually resonate with and I don't agree with. And I think I've been having to kind of stand my ground a little bit more in terms of what I believe, what I choose to believe. And like I've taken up for the ego, and I'm like, I don't believe the ego is evil, and I don't think you should kill your ego. I definitely don't think you should kill your ego. And I don't think that darkness is bad and all these things. And I don't even know if I think that demons are what they're painted out to be. And so, and like same with like the devil and that kind of energy. I just don't know if any of that is what it's been characterized as. I think that it's complicated. And I think that life is complicated. And the spirit realm is complicated. I don't think that everything's good. But I think that good and bad are complicated, because I don't really like hierarchies. It just doesn't seem to work. And I think that when you see things more just as a spectrum and you understand temperance, really you want to be balanced in the middle, then you can understand where good and bad end up coming from. But ultimately, they both need to exist to a certain extent in terms of just overall. What you need to engage with, that can be a different conversation. But there is, I think, a purpose, a reason behind why it is here. So yeah, and so just trying to be more accountable for the way that I've taken on certain characteristics and certain things, definitions and truths, quote unquote truths, that have been taught to me over these past few years and over my lifetime. And now just starting to undo that, I'm just starting to get a little bit more comfortable with the darkness within me that is attached to this detachment. And now to my shadow. I wasn't thinking about my shadow yesterday. I was just thinking more just so based on emotions, but I get it now even more so. And it's interesting because whenever I would think about myself as a child, I really would struggle to imagine the really, like the super, super joyful moments and the super, super, I would struggle to picture myself as like one of those kids that was like laughing and like running around and so excited. And I don't have negative feelings attached to, well, I mean, I'm sure I have some negative feelings attached to my childhood, but my childhood is not painted in this like dark cloud. I don't feel depressive about my childhood. But I don't have these extremes like experiences of glee that I feel like I've felt pressure by myself to attach to childhood and to the inner child. I just don't picture myself that way, and I don't remember myself that way. And I think that's probably because I wasn't that way. I think I was a happy kid, but happiness is a different feeling than what I've always painted it to be in my mind, and what I've always thought it should be. What I actually feel is quite different, and it's not bad. It's just not as extreme. And I think that I've tried to operate in the extremes of the goods because I clearly felt like there was something extremely bad about me that I was running away from, that never actually existed. There was never actually anything wrong with me, but because I could feel this darkness within me and feel this detachment within me. And I felt like there was something wrong. And especially, growing up we live in a religious world and a very Christianity heavy world with, the concept of hell and all of these things, and these things that are made to feel really, really scary and really, really bad, morally, ethically, all these things, dangerous, violent. It made me even more afraid. And especially when I could sense this level of detachment around judgment and things that I would judge. There are things that I do judge very heavily, but also the things that I wouldn't judge, or the things that I didn't feel strongly pulled in any direction. When I wouldn't feel a strong pull, especially within this spiritual journey, I would feel really insecure about that. And I would feel like, why don't, and it's only been recently that I've been like, well, if I don't feel something very strongly, if I don't feel like anything is super, super wrong, then there's probably nothing wrong, because things are probably balanced, and that's probably how it's supposed to feel. It's probably supposed to feel balanced. Like, it's not a big pull in either direction. You just feel fine. If you feel the extremes of things, maybe it's not good. And now I'm starting to understand what people say when they're like, you don't really want to be feeling butterflies all the time, because then you're probably feeling anxious and you're probably feeling nervous and unsettled, which isn't great. And I get that now. But because of the way that I attached emotions to extremes and to being so visceral in order for it to be true and to be real, especially because in my imagination, I can be extreme in my dreams, in my fantasies. It would complicate what actually was the truth, which is that I think I was really, really balanced emotionally as a kid. And I think I was just very observant. I think I was in my shadow more as a child. And then I started to grow up and I started to take on less of my shadow and more of this light. But I'm not sure if this light is actually who I am all the time. I know that I'm somebody who can get very easily excited, and I'm somebody who is very bubbly and all of these things. I know this about myself, and I know that that's true because I do it even when I don't want to do it, I do it. So I know that that's who I am. And I don't have any shame around that. I did have shame around that. I'm sure there's things. But what I'm trying to say is that there is also this emotionally numb, sure, version, part of myself that is a huge part of myself. And over-engaging in the bubbly, over-engaging in the smiley and the joyful and the blah, 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 started to feel like a mask, and it can become exhausting because it's just not the full truth about who I am. And I don't know, I think I felt a lot of shame around accepting that I am this detached person as well, that I am this emotionally numb person as well. I'm not saying numb in the way that numbness has been defined in this world. I'm saying numb in a different way. Numb in a way that is connected to nothingness, and numb in a way that's connected to darkness, and numb in a way that's just connected to the essence of being as well. You don't feel everything. Not feeling is also a feeling, and that's a okay feeling to have. It's a good feeling. I don't feel bad when I'm in this detached, when I'm being myself, and when myself is detached, and when myself is numb, being whatever, being attached to nothingness, I think more so. I can't, it's too much to explain what I'm talking about when I'm talking about nothingness, because that's a whole thing, and I think I've made videos about that before, so I don't know where it is, so you'd have to find it. I don't know. But the point being that I don't think numbness is what it's been characterized as. I don't think detachment is what it's been characterized as. I think it's different. I think it's its own evolved being, just as joy is, just as love and light is, and all these other things. And I think that the shadow, my shadow, is helping me to understand that more and more. And through my music, I've really been able to connect with my shadow and understand who she is a little bit more. And it's interesting because she really kind of controls the realm. She really kind of controls the musical realm for me. She she kind of dominates there, and I think she also dominates there because of what's dominating right now in sound. Like right now, musical sounds are very dark and mysterious, and like just it's that kind of energy. It's kind of gothic. That's what music is in right now, and so those are the beats that I have access to create the songs that I want to make. So I do have like a darker sound just because of the beats that I have access to. And sometimes I do try and find different variations of sound because I don't always want that kind of heaviness. But overall, the music that I do really like to make does kind of have this, it is kind of the realm of my shadow that she gets to really express herself and come out. And it's been very enlightening. It's been very humbling because I'm just kind of understanding that I didn't really understand my shadow at all. And even through this conversation that we're having now, I'm understanding that I don't really know my shadow that well. And she's quite cool and interesting, and I haven't really given a whole lot of time to be her and be with her in a way where she leads, because it's scary for me, because there's so many parts of me that are like, oh my God, I don't want people to misunderstand me. But I think that I'm really the only one that's misunderstanding in those moments when I'm afraid that other people are going to misunderstand me, because that is exactly who I'm being. It's exactly how I'm coming across. And whether people are judging that or not, or feel a certain way about that or not, doesn't really matter. Because I wouldn't care in this energy where I'm like, I get to be myself and I don't try and police myself. But then when it comes to my shadow getting to lead, suddenly everything needs to be super, perfected and watched over, and it's really unfair. And I don't know. I think I'm just realizing I don't want to do that anymore, and I want to give myself the space to be all of who I am, not just joy, which I am very often. Very often I am bubbly and blah, 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 because I can't help it. I realize that. It's just kind of who I am. But in the moments when my shadow does, when I want to be my shadow, when I want to be that version of me, which isn't my shadow, it's just me. I don't want to be separate. I don't want it to be something that I just step into being. I want it to be all together. And I recognize, but the detachment is me. And I think that's the thing that I was trying to say earlier, where I was like, we're one, but there is this separateness. The separateness is also me. That split, I am the split as well. Like, it's all me, and I'm trying to become all of that because I like that. And I like when I realize that I'm not afraid of things that I feel like I should be afraid of. I like that. I like how strong I am and courageous I am and brave I am. And that all comes from the part of me that I've called my shadow. And I just don't want to be in the shadows. I don't think that that's how darkness is supposed to exist. I think that darkness isn't just physical. I don't think that darkness is just a color. I don't think that darkness is just the shadow. I think that darkness exists in the light as well. And I think that the shadow is supposed to be walking with us in the light as well. And the shadow is really just a way to express the weight that it carries. But it's just as powerful, and it's just as belonging in my waking life, in my everyday life, in my day-to-day, in every step, as the version of me that I feel to be more palatable. and that I consider, my front-facing self. I want all of me to be my front-facing self without shame. And Queen Cup has been really, really inspirational in that as well, because she and her shadow, which is just herself, she is just so brave and vulnerable in the journey that she's going through with merging all of herself. And she's someone that I really admire for that as well. She really is able to work from that space and doesn't fight it. And I think that is something that I really aspire to be able to do as well. And I see Professor Melanie do that as well. And we all have it come across in different ways, but I like to see what's happening, I think, with detachment. And I think that there's a lot of, there can be quite a bit of fear mongering around it, around being detached and around being numb and all these things. But I actually think it's just you're feeling more than you've ever felt before. You're just feeling feelings that don't feel like what we've always thought feelings are supposed to feel like. We're just learning more, we're evolving, and I just realizing how complex, our existence really is, and our experience of life really is, alongside our spirits, and in a spirit, in a more informed world. And so, yeah, I'm just feeling, I hope that made sense. A lot of me feels like I've just been rambling, but I think that's okay too, because I think that there's a teaching in vulnerability, and I like teaching. I really like talking about these things and trying to share my experience in a way that is more tangible and just relatable, that people, understand that we're all just human at the end of the day. And yeah, so that's what I was thinking about with detachment, and I feel like I've kind of gotten to begin this conversation. I'm sure this won't be the last conversation I have about this, but I'm happy I've gotten to begin it because I think it was necessary, and now this can be a conversation that we have a little bit more often. But it's always harder to just begin and get it all out there, because you stumble and you trip and you fall, and so this is just the beginning of now learning about this a little bit more. I haven't spoken about nothingness in a really long time, and it's a concept. It's not a concept, it's the truth. Well, it's in my world. But, so I sort of stumble around talking about nothingness as well. But nothingness, I believe, to be like an ancestral spirit, and the ancestral spirit from which we're all born, from which all of this has come from. I feel like nothingness could be spirit's mother, like before there, and it's interesting because it's such a brief moment, but it's such a long moment. And nothingness is where you understand that time couldn't possibly exist, and nothingness is where you understand magic, and nothingness is where darkness and light began to become separated, and nothingness is where it's the point in which everything begins. And I think that nothingness was the first ancestor to come and wake me up and help me begin going down this path. And she really held me, and without judgment, understanding that there was no sense in trying to scrutinize over what I was to become, just understanding that I was here now. And that birthing experience, she was also the first death, because as soon as something becomes, nothingness no longer is, and yet there is always an antithesis. So then nothingness becomes this energy of the antithesis, and I imagine her experience moving through that, and she's just a spirit that is so loving and so brave, and I think she represents the part of ourselves that has been the most admonished and just treated with such cruelty, and can really reflect the way that we treat each other with such cruelty, just because of this fear of not becoming, and also this loneliness. I imagine what it was like to be nothing. But then even, it's just so, I don't know, she's such a wonder to me. she's just pure magic to me, and I just want to honor her because I feel like she is an ancestor that, you know, I mean, we would be nothing. We wouldn't be without her. But to be nothing is to be so beautiful, because to be nothing means that you are everything. It's just, she just represents so much for me. And it's hard for me to understand her a lot of the time. And I want to understand her all the time. But I don't know. And then I think about how not knowing is exactly what is just getting exactly to where she is. But I think about Spirit, her daughter, and Spirit is like my best friend, but Spirit is also this energy that I watch, and I talked about it a lot in the beginning when I first started making YouTube videos, and I speak about it sometimes about how I just want Spirit, because I had this feeling last year around April or May, like around May and April, around Spirit and around how there seemed to be this like shame of darkness and also a love for darkness, but this shame around herself and this effort to get away from herself that caused all of these creations, and this chasing of light, this chasing of being the creator. And it really opened up a lot to me around mothers and motherhood and creation energy and light and darkness and all these things. But it's just so interesting because it's hard for me to not these days, or I think where I'm at right now in my spiritual journey is I look at Spirit and I look at nothingness, and I want to care for them, and I want to see them, and I want them to know that I see them. And I don't like hierarchies, I think, for many reasons, but also I think because it makes it hard for Spirit to know that we see her as well. You know, that it's not just them seeing us, it's not just that they can be taken care of as well. I think that it's just like when you want your parents to know that they deserve to be taken care of as well, that they don't always have to be the caretaker. You see the trauma that parents go through, and then suddenly they become this adult and this weird figure where it's like they have to be the sole caretaker and they don't get to heal. And same thing with ancestors. I think it's all connected, and I think that's why I want to take down this hierarchy. And it doesn't have to be forever. We can rebuild it in a way that works if that's a concept that makes sense. But just for now, I just think we all need to be able to see each other and on a level playing field where we can like hug each other and embrace each other. And there doesn't have to be these reaching up or below. It can be balanced, and we can find this temperance energy. I used to really not like temperance because temperance to me signified so much waiting and so much hanging in the balance. Temperance and the hanged man, I was like, ugh. And I still, even like with the hanged man energy, I still struggle sometimes to really enjoy that energy. And I don't think it's always meant to be enjoyed. But yeah, okay. I was just making sure something wasn't happening. But yeah, I might start to talk more about nothingness. I don't know. Maybe we'll see. Yeah, maybe she'll start to talk more to me. I mean, I'm always hanging around nothingness. That's exactly where, like, that's where I feel like that's where so much of us is born from. I think that's where the shadow, like, I think that's her mom. Like, I don't know. There's just so much love there. And sometimes it makes me want to cry. And I think that the feeling of wanting to cry is such a beautiful feeling, but then when it doesn't happen, that's where that fear and shame would come in, because it was like, why isn't this happening? And sometimes the point is just to want. The point is just to want to feel something, but you don't necessarily need to have that feeling satisfied. There's a point to just desiring. There's a point to yearning. Queen Cup was talking about yearning a lot in her most recent reading. There's a point to that. And I've experienced a lot of yearning over feeling, especially crying. I've experienced a lot of yearning over wanting to be able to cry and cry. And even now, these days, I feel yearning to cry. And I think that that's because there's so much, it's just so physical when you cry. It's such a physical experience, and it brings emotions into the physical in a way that I find to be mesmerizing. As much as I'm overwhelmed by it when it happens, I also love it. I love the feeling because it's just so, it's so real in your body. And I like how uncontrollable it is. And I feel embarrassed about it when it's in public because I'm like, you're seeing me in a way that I'm not, but ultimately it's really good. So I understand why I yearn for it. But, yearning isn't meant to create shame. And I think that I'm learning to undo that, having shame around desire and having shame around desire for certain emotions. I'm learning to move beyond that, and that comes with crying too. Just because I yearn to cry and I don't cry doesn't mean that there's something wrong with me. I don't need to have every desire satisfied. Sometimes I just want to desire. I'm a daydreamer. I'm a Cancer. I live in the fantasy realm. I live in the subconscious. It doesn't need to all be brought to life. Sometimes I just want to play with death energy. Sometimes I just want to play with the energy in between, with the gray. It doesn't all need to come alive. And that's what I felt a lot with spirit, that I want spirit to know that life doesn't always need to be created. Sometimes we can sit in the death, that spirit is enough as spirit is, and that all of these creations are enough as they are, and that there doesn't need to be more if we don't want there to be more. We don't have to keep going. You don't have to keep incarnating. You don't have to keep doing these things. We can all just sit with each other and get to know each other as the souls that we are, in the experience that we are, where we are at. We can stop progressing if we want to. We don't have to keep moving forward. You don't have to move at all. We can be still if we want to. And I think that that's just something, movement, yes, is a pillar of existence, but also so is stillness. You can't have movement if you don't have stillness. There can't be stillness if you don't have movement. But it's just like trying to have existence without acknowledging nothingness. There needs to be more of an acknowledgement of nothingness. And I feel like as I begin to understand more of the detachment within myself, it's all kind of coming full circle, which I'm happy about because I really do like talking about these types of things. It feels really natural, and it feels like I don't have to reach for anything. It doesn't feel like I have to learn anything, because this is just something that doesn't need to be, no one needs to teach you anything about this. This is something that you know within yourself. You just have to begin to talk to this part of yourself. And I feel like these kinds of conversations are the easiest triggers for shadow work in a way where it doesn't have to be traumatizing. And that begins to totally change the way that we look at healing, and totally change the way that we look at darkness, and really revolutionize that expression. The expressions of those energies as well, which will really bring some healing, because all of that, those conversations that we have about low vibrations and all these things, I just don't see it being helpful in the long run. Well, it's helpful in the long run because it's pushing us to this place where we're going to get to a more balanced space. But we don't need the hierarchy. I just don't think we do. We don't always have to be climbing the ladder, It's okay to be where you are. And of course, in some sense, hierarchies will exist because they exist. They just do exist, like age. There is something that is 0 and there is something that is 10, and that is a hierarchy. But we don't need to have hierarchies it doesn't need to be everything. You know what I mean? You don't have to be going to the higher realms. You don't have to be accessing the higher stuff. Or if you are, they don't need to be attached to morality and ethics and what's good and what's bad and all these things. Ascending doesn't have to mean going up and reaching for it. It doesn't have to be attached to all these extra things. Things can just be as they are, and that's okay. It doesn't need to have all these evolving meanings. And that is also connecting us more to nothingness, allowing simplicity, accepting things to be simple, and just letting that be. So, yeah, I'm really excited I do hope to have more conversations like these. And I like to hear what people are going through and then try and break it down and get to these core things, because I think it is really helpful when we get to acknowledge that we are just sourced from pure magic. And so magic is the key, and recognizing darkness and understanding these conversations and having these conversations legitimately and not feeling crazy or stupid is the key. Like legitimizing the fact that this is true, that you have this soul, you have these darkness, all these things, these demons, all these things, and all of that is real, and really working and moving and living from that place. That is the key to becoming happier, because it's living in the truth, and we need to live in the truth. The truth is the key. So yeah. So right now, me and Detachment are just having this nice dance, and I'm appreciating that. And I think Beyonce put out a song that really caters to that energy. Delestro, I think it's called Echoes. It's fun. And I think we see detachment coming up in different forms, like the dark feminine, all those conversations around that. The dark goddesses, I was talking about how there is this rise in dark goddess energy with warrior energy. So there's all these things. Everything's coming up, and everything moves in timing, and everything will be okay. I truly believe that. I feel that way. And if I don't feel that way, I'll let you know. But yeah, right now I feel pretty good, fine and balanced. So that's nice. And it's tumultuous. Everything goes up and down. So when I don't feel that way anymore, I'll try to remember that I'll feel that way again, and I probably will forget, and it doesn't matter, because that's just life. And it's all going to be okay. I just have to, I don't have to remember that. It's fine if I don't remember it. I will remember it eventually, which I think is just the point. But I like having these conversations. So I think that's it for now. I'm going to go ahead and upload this. And yeah, talk to you guys later. Maybe I'll film something else, talk about something else or something. Maybe we'll do a reading or something. I like just talking without the cards, though. That is important for me. So it's just important because it just reassures me that I don't need anything. Sometimes I need to be reminded of that. But I do love tarot. I love tarot, and I love reading cards. It's so much fun to me. So, but yeah, sometimes I do just like talking and having a conversation as well. So, and I do want to have conversations with you guys, especially about things that are interesting to me. So, and interesting to you as well. So, yeah, please, I really hope this reaches who it's meant to reach, and put forth that it does reach who it's meant to reach. And if it does, then comment and say your thoughts, and let's have conversations. And yeah, and if you want to stick around, because I'm always sharing messages, then you can subscribe and lock the video, and so it shares with other people. And then yeah, I've got to get better at marketing myself. So that's all I think for now. Goodbye.